The Arts Live Call on BBC Radio Kent.
Now, musicians across the country are finding new ways to keep themselves busy, get their stuff heard as we move deeper into 2021. With all the available funding out there for professional musicians, there is still 1/3 who have not been able to access any emergency support. Get Musicians Working is a project run by the Emery Foundation. As part of the project, they're providing musicians grants in return for the creation of inspirational content for beginner and young musicians. The first patron of Get Musicians Working is Jamie Lonsdale, a singer-songwriter who first heard about the project when he employed 80 musicians to record some tracks with him at Abbey Road Studios. We were just talking about Abbey Road last night on the show. And that all happened just after the first lockdown was eased. That every time I hear that piece of music, just phenomenal. The conductor of the musicians, Robert Emery, conductor, pianist and record producer, is from the Emery Foundation, who are running the project, and is with me tonight. Hi, Robert.
Oh, good evening, Dominic. How are you doing?
Really good. And it's so beautiful to hear that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a good track, isn't it? It's a good old traditional song.
Just fantastic. Okay, so you've worked with many in the industry, Russell Watson, Andre Bocelli, Meatloaf, what a combo. In terms of the idea of all of this coming together, take us through it, because clearly people have been going through it themselves and something needed to happen.
Yeah, sure. I mean, as a conductor, my job is to stand in front of musicians and wave my arms around and pretend to know what I'm doing. And do you know what? You can't really do that in your front room by yourself. It doesn't really have the same desired effect. So when we went into lockdown, all of a sudden my diary was wiped for the whole of 2020 and 2021. I lost all of my work overnight. It's pretty astonishing, really. And I just thought, what can I do to help? What can I do to help other people? Forget about me. What can I do to help the musical family that I work with, you know, the thousands of musicians? And that's how getmusiciansworking.org started. It's as simple as trying to raise money for the musicians that are unfortunately in the position where they're not allowed to work. Almost every other industry have been allowed to go back to work in some form or another. You know, bars, pubs, and restaurants, they've been able to turn around and do takeaways and things. Other people can work from home instead. But performing musicians, you need to be out performing to an audience. And unfortunately, we have been essentially banned from doing that. And me personally, I haven't had any paid work now since last March, so nearly 10 months. And there's, you know, hundreds of musicians out there who have done the same. So we set up getmusiciansworking.org to try and raise money for these musicians. And the shocking statistic, it's 34% of all professional musicians are considering abandoning their career completely because they can no longer afford to be a musician.
You know, that is an absolute tragedy, isn't it? That we are in a situation where clearly because of what's happening, and we understand the restrictions and those implemented rules perhaps that are there, but lots in the arts world are saying, but what about the room for manoeuvre that has to happen in certain areas? That, you know, there are seemingly obvious moments where there is one group in the arts and culture world that seem to have a particular ability to do something because it's been decided they can, and then there are others who simply can't. I know a friend who is a very well-known drummer who has spent his entire life doing that, and he's delighted this week to be picking up 12 weeks work working in a pet store. Now, he loves pets. He absolutely loves them. But the point is, his career has changed overnight. He thinks he's one of the lucky ones because he's picked up some work, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, 47% of all professional musicians have tried to find alternative work. And hardly any of them have been able to do so. And this is the argument. Everybody just turns around and says, well, if you can't do your job, why don't you just go and find other work? And people are kind of conveniently forgetting that we're in the middle of this situation where there are less jobs available than any other time in the last decade. So it's not easy to go and get any other job. In fact, it's really, really tricky. And that's why we're here to help.
Rob, stay with us. I want to bring in Ian Rathbone, who's a violinist from Tunbridge Wells. Ian is one of the musicians to receive a grant from the Get Musicians Working project. Good to have you with us, Ian, tonight.
Hi there. Hi there.
And actually, when you heard about this, I guess it was a moment of, right, okay, so that's something positive I can do.
Yes, that's right. It's everything helps, of course. Last March, I was rehearsing when the news was gradually breaking. Well, this looks like things are going to get in the way. The following week, I was due to go to Spain for a week. Mid-rehearsal, first the coffee break, they said, it looks like Madrid. I'm not sure if that concert's going to happen. We're not really sure, but there are 3 others around it because they've closed the Madrid concert hall. I thought, well, we'll still go. Maybe, that one day we won't do that concert. By lunchtime, it was, that trip's not going to happen. We had the following day, we had a concert in London, which was all linked, and then that was it. Right, next week, you're not going away. In May, we might have a tour to Germany. By the following week, even that was cancelled. And you're thinking, hang on a sec, you're looking into the horizon, there's nothing on the horizon. And obviously, originally we thought, well, a couple of months, by the summer, we'll be back in gear, it'll be fine. Everyone's got things in the summer, different projects. By the autumn, we'll be back to normal. Of course, things were cancelled further in advance. And you're thinking, well, what about a big Christmas chunk or something like that?
And then it keeps going, doesn't it? And that's the point.
It's a knock-on effect. When the lockdown was lifted, luckily enough, one of the orchestras I play with are freelance, but one of the orchestras had some concerts in a church, in St. Martin's Church in Trafalgar Square, 2 a month. So obviously that's not going to pay for everything, but it's something. With a spread out audience, they could sell, they said up to 100 people, but with spacing, it brought it down to mid-80s. That's sold out in a huge church. So we're standing there spaced out, whereas normally you stand next to someone. You have to be spaced out 2.5 meters. Everyone gets the rulers out, which is quite strange to try and play. It's lovely to play live music, but when you're socially distanced, it works very differently. It's a very different feeling.
And presumably, I mean, you play the viola, and I just wonder about sound. What happens here, Robert? Bringing in on this with us as well. Presumably, when you are doing that kind of spaced out situation, I know here in Kent we've had a few concerts where that has happened, particularly with Jam on the Marsh, where they've done that in historic buildings and the rest. But you change the dynamic, don't you? You change the acoustic, but also for the performer themselves, that changes for their ears, doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes life very, very difficult. I mean, the track that you just played from Jamie's album, that was recorded socially distanced at Abbey Road Studios. Now, Abbey Road Studio 1 is what we were in. Normally, you could fit about 500 musicians in that. And we would normally record that and the other tracks within 3 hours. It took us 2 full days to record that because we had to have a maximum of 15 people in the studio at any one time. So 15 people would come in, record their part. They would go out. They would deep clean the room. 15 more people would come in, record their part, go out, deep clean the room. It took 2 full days to record what should have taken 3 hours. And it was incredibly expensive to do so. But thankfully, we've got Jamie to champion the industry and to help us out. But, people forget the music industry. It's a massive industry. £5.8 billion is what the music industry brought into this country in 2019. Now, if I put that into perspective, if we think about the fishery industry, for instance, we all know how important that is and how much that has been in the news to do with Brexit and fighting over the fishery industry. The industry is worth 446 million a year. So the music alone is worth 10 times more than the fishing industry annually. And then if you go into the arts in general in this country, it's £101 billion industry, the fastest growing industry in the UK. And it really amazes me that for such a large industry, something hasn't happened where 33% of people have fallen through the cracks of any of the funding. It's astonishing. And
then again, as we've been talking about on this arts programme, it comes down to this often feeling that the arts are something you do for enjoyment. It's just an added on to your life. It's a luxury rather than actually, for many people will say during this period, they've realised how much it is part of not only our culture, but our mental health too. Really, really important. Ian, I want to ask you about this grant and how you had to use your own skills to create content for young musicians. Just briefly, as we run out of time, just give us an idea of what you did and how that was achieved.
Well, so instead of playing concerts, performing, things like that, the idea is that you write online content, for example, to answer questions that rather than people Googling, you could write simple, what's the difference between a viola and a violin, not for a punchline, but from a performer's point of view, rather than Wikipedia, what's this, what's that, one's bigger, one's smaller,
well,
one's higher, lower.
Clearly, Ian, I could have had a bit of help with that one to understand the difference.
There you are, you see.
But that's the point, isn't it?
You'll have to subscribe, won't you?
I will. It's about education, isn't it? But at the same time, making it relatable, Ian.
Exactly, yeah. It's not just, I pick up my instrument and play, there's the audience, ready-made, then I go home. It's making the performers think, drawing from their education, however long ago that was, thinking, how do I relate this to children, to anyone really, in a different way, rather than this is what I do, being more approachable perhaps.
Can I ask you, has it helped your mental health during this time to actually have something you can really get yourself into? Well,
yeah, in the fact that it's something related to what I always do. Of course, you find different things. I'm homeschooling 2 children, that sort of thing, trying to keep them fit and healthy, cooking different things. That's one thing. Of course, you keep yourself occupied. But just doing something that is you really do and is your vocation is very different than getting a job in M&S or delivering things, or, it really pulls, it's your identity. If you're a performer for 20, 30, 40 years and someone asks you, hang on a sec, just from a different angle, dig deeper into who you are and what you are, rather than just go and get a job in some other shop.
That's really key, Robert, isn't it? It is about identity, because we all know whatever job you're in, you have a connection with it. If you're in retail, you love the enjoyment of retail and people who come into your shop and being able to serve people and all the rest of it. If you're a musician like you and Ian, it is part of you. The instrument isn't just something you pick up, it is you. You learn to become part of it, and that's how we hear things in a performance. So you undoubtedly completely get that. I just need to ask you on this last point. There will be musicians right now listening to this program who go, I want to help, I want to get some funding, I want to be part of this. Can they just link in and join you?
They can. So they just go to getmusiciansworking.org. And in fact, if any of the general public want to help musicians out there as well, please do go to getmusiciansworking.org and donate just a $5. It's unbelievably helpful to us. And then those musicians who are kind enough to write content to help the young educational kids of tomorrow play better and learn better, then all that content goes on to Ted's List, which is a website I set up in the name of my son, Teddy. And that's teds-list.com, and it's a beautiful circle of life. The general public are helping the musicians who are in need, and the musicians are helping the musicians of tomorrow.
It's been such a joy having you both on the programme. I'm so glad we were able to have you with us tonight. And Ian Rathbone, thank you so much for being with us from there in Tunbridge Wells. And Robert Emery, who's from the Emery Foundation, who are running that project, joining us tonight here on the programme. Absolute joy. GetMusiciansWorking.org is the website you need to go to. It's a Dominic King show from BBC Radio Kent with the Daddy Warhols and Bohemian Like You. 81333 on the text. Start your message with the word Kent. If you're a Kent musician and you've been hearing that tonight, let us know your thoughts. 81333. Start your message with the word Kent.